Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about any question you might have around virtual or media production. Second hour is usually something we think we'd like to spend a little more time on. Today, we're going to talk about Klover mics. These are used in football games and lots of other places. And one of the founder of Klover, Paul Terpstra, is going to be here and joining us and answering your questions about parabolic microphones. And I'm pretty excited about it. I grew up thinking that these were, just I had like a little one that I bought for like $160 on, I don't know, Sharper Image or something. And these are these are the big ones. so we're excited to have Paul here. And then we've got a lot of great things this week. AWS tomorrow, just general Q&A and discussion of AWS tomorrow amongst all of us. On Thursday, we're going to talk about how to get the most out of office hours. I think it's a mystery for a lot of people, so we're going to try to remove a little of that mystery on Thursday. So stay tuned to that for that. All right, now we're going to jump into the questions, and we have a new question asker. Stuart F. Melbourne. All right, Mr. Melbourne. Let's go. Let's jump to the questions.
I will take it away, and I would like to point out that my set is artfully dressed with a Sony PBR 330 behind me, which is a big Sony parabolic microphone with a Behringer C1.
There you go.
C2. Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas asks, do any of the personal Zoom room devices like the Facebook Portal, Amazon Echo, etc. support 1080p into a 1080p meeting?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I don't believe that any of them do. Right before the show, we fired up the Portal just to double check, and the stats that I'm seeing on it are still 1280. And then the device that I had high hopes for, which is the Fire Cube, I'm only getting 1280 out of that. So I'm hoping that maybe there's an update, but who knows? And then I haven't retested. I have the latest 10, which is the larger Echo. That one might, but I'll have to go steal it from my daughter. She's got it in her room. She commandeered it. So I bought one for testing, and then she fell in love with it.
Next question.
And we're back to Rupert, who asks, Serge has been doing some testing with Starlink, lucky boy. Can we hear about some of the results?
Go ahead, Serge.
Yeah, I will say that Starlink is good enough for testing purpose or if you have a backup plan. But here you can see my SRT feed running for a few days with a 500 ms delay. It's not choppy, but sometimes you will lose the feed for a few seconds, and then it's not for production yet, in my mind.
And have you done any Zooms with it?
Yes, I did. This weekend I was on Zoom with it. While the SRT feed was going on, I was on Zoom on my Mac without issue.
And I guess the question is what's the latency like with it? Did it feel natural or did it feel long?
No, the latency is around 50 ms, so it's not that bad. It's a lot better than other internet connection I saw in my life.
And did you have any breakup, or was it nice and smooth from a Zoom perspective?
Every hours I will have a breakup. But the problem in my situation is I have a tree giving me a little bit of obstruction. So any advice will be to have a pretty good installation. That's the main point I discovered.
Right. Go ahead, Rupert.
I was going to ask about the trees, but I was also remember Serge saying that he's been able to use like an RDP connection quite stable over a connection like that, to where you wouldn't really even notice that you're getting some latency.
Interesting. That's great. Next question.
And Danny Law in Malaysia. Hey, somebody in my own time zone. Any advice on how to reduce the sound from HVAC, which is heating, vacuum, air conditioning, air vents in a room, setting up recording and live stream podcast space?
Go ahead, Rupert.
I found that this can sometimes, the noise can be sometimes caused by the air hitting the louvers on the vent. So if you have an adjustable vent, you can sometimes tune the amount of noise it's making by adjusting the vent open or closed, and you get less disturbance to the airflow, which is what produces at least a portion of the noise. You could also just try removing the vent plate and go into the hardware store and looking for an alternative type of vent or a more open arrangement where the air is not going to get disturbed so much. Or you can also try tune, if it's a distributed system, you can try opening up the other vents in that floor or whatever a little more to just reduce the airflow just a little bit in your area. So again, it's not getting so much velocity coming through there.
Go ahead, Chris.
When I was at my house last summer, I had an AC vent right over my head, and it was 100+ degrees out there all the time, and so it would blow often, and it would just kick in and right at the worst time. And that's part of the reason why I bought the Mix Pre with the noise assist. It absolutely knocked it all out. It was really amazing.
Next question. Nope, we can't hear you, Stuart.
There we go. I just had to scroll up to see the question. Rupert McRae is back from Dallas, Texas again. What features would you like most added to a Zoom Breakout Rooms?
Go ahead, Ari.
One of the features that I would very much like to have in Zoom Breakout Rooms is the ability to send audio to all of the breakout rooms. In situations where you have workshops where you need to give directions to the various groups and know the text messages are not really an alternative, that would be great. Some very large events have tried to pump in audio through third-party applications, and that messed things up from a user perspective who were not always able to connect, so that would be a great feature.
Go ahead, John.
Recording, that's all I need in breakout rooms is recording.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I'd love to see the ability to send video in. So some kind of click where you say, like a 30-year experience where we want to send something in where smaller groups can discuss. So ability to send video would be one of my top ones.
Yeah, we proposed a show that didn't happen, which was going to be 300 rooms, that we're going to have about 150 to 200 people in each room, or into the breakout rooms. The idea, though, to your point, was we wanted to have a plenary where they all get that. So we were going to have to do that all in AWS, put it all up there and distribute it and have instances that push the video into every single room, so that we can have a plenary session with the X number of thousands of people, right? Tens of thousands of people, but allow them to talk amongst themselves, to your point. So the idea is that you have if you think about it, and when we think about scale and we think about virtual events and why that's important, is these were going to be grouped based on their interests. So this group might be all from Ghana, this group might all be from Cambodia, and there's people who are going to lead that discussion, continually. And so think about giant breakout rooms where you're going to talk about a big global issue, and then you're going to break into individual conversations that are in those birds of a feather kind of thing. And it could be based on interest or based on geographic location. And then there's someone in each one of those rooms that's going to lead that discussion or whatever. And then you're going to go back to the big discussion and then go back to these little breakout rooms among them to talk about it. And then it's doable, just really hard. So to guys, to kind of just illustrate what guys, comment is just, and what the video, what everyone's saying with the video into the breakout room, being able to have one place that I send that out and it goes out to all of them, be super useful. Next question.
And we're back to Serge Blondin from Montreal, Canada. Does the panel recommend doing live demo or pre-recorded demo for a live webinar IT conference?
Go ahead, Ari.
So I'm going to assume that by IT you mean coding, and I don't know why I assume that. It's just that something is glaringly apparent when you talk about coding, and that is the minuscule size of text. And this is regardless of whether it's live or pre-recorded. So one thing to pay close attention to is the text. I've seen many conferences where the coders are coding away and giving demonstrations, and it's just not legible. And that's even before we talk about resolution. The other point is, of course, interactivity. If it's interactive and if you're going to have questions and answers related to the coding and demonstrations, then yes, it would have to be live. Otherwise, and this is the general debate about pre-recorded content versus live, One of the point, it's largely a question of budget. Depends on the appearance of the production. If it's a lesser budget production, then often live is just easier to put together. Those would be the considerations.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
For me, whenever it comes to a demo, you never know what's going to happen. That could crash halfway through. So we do a pre-record with they'll end up doing a voiceover. That's the best solution. So they record their demo. They can cut out any dead space, because there's always going to be a time where something needs to install or process or whatever. Cut it all together, and then you run the demo. They'll do the talkover. Try not to do the talkover in the recording, or else your audio levels are going to be completely different. And if they said that they need to do that, I always try and get them to record it anyway. So if everything does fail, I can instantly jump to that recording and continue on from there.
Go ahead, Sky.
I always look at a pre-record as a fully edited, produced experience that you can't do for whatever reason. Maybe it's budget, maybe it's location issues, that you're trying to bring that external thing, a big server room, into this conference space. So you can share at that moment what that visual aid is. So that's how I read the question, and bringing an outside experience into a single instance is what I see editing a thing.
Go ahead, Chris.
I think possibly pre-record a video to discuss live, but I think the best thing is to do things live. I think the reason people don't do it is it's really hard to do it well. I mean, we know people that are exemplary at it. Alex, you've told the story about how you would rehearse those things for, I can't remember what show you were on.
I think days.
For
3 minutes.
Yeah. And it's hard to do. It's really hard to do. And 99.9% of the people aren't willing to put the time in to do it well. But if you can, it's much better.
Yeah, I think that what I would do, and what we're looking at for some stuff in the future is I'm going to send you a recording of how to do this. And then we're going to do it slowly. So the recording is one whole piece. This is how to get something done. This is what I want to talk about. It might be intercut with illustrations of why it works and what it does and everything else, but it's all condensed and it's not interrupted, and it's pretty short, and then I'm going to do it. I'm going to send that out to you 3 or 4 days before the event, and then I'm going to do it for you. And it will have taken, the real time to do that operation might be 10, 15, 20 minutes. I'm going to give myself an hour or two. What we're going to do is we're going to just go through it and talk about it. And we started doing this in the classes that I was teaching in Rwanda. I would send them a video of here's how to do a flag, in Cinema 4D, for instance. And here's a little video. Go do it. Your assignment is to upload to this folder your work product, or come with questions. So I want to see you finish it, or you better have a question about why, to tell me what you got stuck on. And then we have discussions that were 8,000 miles apart, that would talk through what their questions are. Why doesn't this work? And what does this happen? And especially in an IT, if you assume people have the hardware or software that you're talking about, it is an incredible way for them to, to learn, is to get that video and then kind of work through it very slowly. Like, well, now I'm going to go step by step. And as I get to each step, what are your questions about those steps? If you think about the tagging that we're doing, imagine being able to tag every step, and saying, I have questions about this step. So when we get to that, we go, okay, we got 4 questions about this thing that I did, So I think that getting ahead of it, again, giving people time to watch a video and then think about it changes the conversation pretty dramatically. Next question.
And Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas. Any up-to-date thoughts on Windows 11?
Serge?
I have Windows 11 on my system for a few months since its beta release. I'm using it with my vMix. I will say it's rock stable. I didn't have any stability issue. The weird issue I hit yesterday was a frame rate issue with the video on Zoom. Try switching from HDMI cable to a DisplayPort cable, same issue. And the funny thing is, if I'm connecting to the same system with Parsec, I don't have the frame rate issue. So I know it's not the system. I know it's not the display. it's something weird with the video card driver or something like that.
Go ahead, Jason.
My problem with the way that Microsoft makes an operating system is the same for 11 as it was for 10. They started with a veneer of a new operating system and then broke things going down instead of making them better from the bottom up and then putting the cosmetics on top of it. They, have spent years inconveniencing people with Windows 10. I do not dislike Microsoft, but they're not giving me much to like at this point.
And go ahead, Stuart.
I've just put a link in the chat. Runs on ARM processor. And the link in the chat is a guide on how to install it on Raspberry Pi without needing an external computer. But to Jason's point there, if you have a good look at all the control panels when you finally get into them on all the different versions of Windows, they might as well be Windows 95.
Next question.
And I'm not going to pronounce it how it's said. I'll just say Chris Fenwick, respectfully. Alex, how did you get your camera control back into your ATEM?
So for those of you watching, there has been a challenge in our my ATEM. So a couple of us had this problem where our ATEM Extreme suddenly just stopped controlling the camera. It still operates, still switches, still does all the things. It just can't talk to the camera. And so I'll tell you where I'm at right now. It is working. I swapped from my ATEM Extreme to my ATEM Mini Pro. That did not fix it. So changing from one to the other did not fix it. The two things that I did, and I unfortunately did them both at the same time because I did it right before the show, is that I changed the HDMI cable and I put it into HDMI 1. I generally don't put my cameras into HDMI 1. And so I put it into HDMI 1 and immediately had control of the camera. And so now the next step, if you ask me tomorrow, the next step is to put my Extreme back in with I just didn't have time to do it I'm not going to do it during the show, but I'll probably, but later today before Mac break, I'm going to put my Extreme back in and then put it into 1 and just see if that works and see if we've worked our way around that puzzle. For those of you, it was working and then one day it just stopped working. I also downgraded my operating system. I downgraded to 8.6.1 instead of 8.6.3. That didn't make any difference. So it was completely different switchers, different cameras, updated firmware, all the things, and to a system that hadn't been changed at all. Trying to find a solution, and the solution that occurred so far was that I changed my HDMI cable to one of my Uni cables from some monoprice cable. But there should be no reason that monoprice cable has been working for 3 months. So I don't have an answer to why I haven't driven it down, but it is working again. And it's so nice. I don't know how. I don't remember how I used to do this without being able to control the camera. so it's good to have the camera back. So anyway, that's what we know so far. All right. Next question.
And it's from Tommy Shantz in St. Paul. I think that's Minnesota because I don't know US states, obviously. Who in the panel has an Atmos system for listening, and what matrix do you have? 5.1, 7.1, etc.
Go ahead, Jason.
I have the Samsung HWQ950A, which is 11.1.4, and it's pretty awesome.
And this is a sound bar, or is it
It's a sound bar, and it's rear speakers that are also upward firing. So I've got 4 in the back, subwoofer, and then an 11 implement sound bar.
Go ahead, Serge.
Have a 5.1.4.2 system. It's a 2-speaker reflecting on the ceiling. I will prefer to have ceiling speakers because the reflection for me, it's not doing a great job.
And I have a couple different systems. I have a 5.1 in my office. I have a 7.1 in my living room, and then I have a 5.1.4 in the office. The 5.1 is in my office, my home office. 5.1.4 is in my office. And then I essentially have everything when I put my headphones on at this point. so those are the different matrices that I have. And the up speakers are pretty impressive. I will say 5.1 is like 80% of the experience. The 7 adds another 10%, and then the dot 4, dot 2. And for those of you listening, 5 is the number of just primary speakers. The 1 is the subwoofer or LFE, and then the last digit. So if you say 5.1.4, the 4 or 2 are the up speakers above you. And we were talking about it before the show. I can't believe it's an amazing thing to have headphones in and be able to hear 5.1.4 or 7.1.4, where you can hear the speakers up versus low. And we talked about some of the science behind that. We're going to deal with that more in the future. So it's pretty cool. All right, next question.
And we're going to Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. Comment on the production values and content of this year's Emmy Awards, disaster or success? And if I remember rightly, we had a poll yesterday where the answer was most people didn't watch it.
Go ahead, John.
That's exactly right. So the production value was okay. Content was okay. Ted Lasso did good, which was good. I just don't think the audience is there. The kids aren't watching because there's no participation trophies.
Sorry, that was funny. I've never been that big into award shows in general, and I think the Emmys didn't. When I was growing up, the Emmys were kind of like, well, that's TV, so I didn't pay much attention to it. And TV has gotten much bigger, but it didn't mean as much. And even with the Oscars, I think that I stopped watching after Ben Burt didn't win in WALL-E. We've talked about it before. I was like, well, if he's not going to win by carrying half a movie with audio, I'm not going to watch anymore. And so I haven't seen one since. So anyway, that was the only one that I watched a little bit of, and I stopped. Next question.
And it's Tobias Moss in Minneapolis. Have you ever last second intentionally absented yourself or broken something on purpose in order to pressure test your team? What do you think of this strategy?
Go ahead, Stuart.
Breaking equipment on purpose? Never. Never, 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 never. It's childish. Putting an air gap between equipment and challenging people to find it, that's a different matter. But actually breaking something. And one other little thing, there was a very inexperienced model / actress I worked with ages ago. And to teach her about some of the sharks in the industry, I literally put a GoPro in a room that we were about to do a photo shoot and challenged her to find it so that she would know to look for these sorts of things. So there are ways of doing it, but not breaking equipment.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, not breaking equipment, but if you're dealing with systems that are monitored, you can disconnect the sensors to make sure that whatever protocol that is supposed to happen after that actually happens and that people do what they are supposed to do. Same thing with safety protocols. I've triggered alarms to make sure that the right things happen if you have the authority to do it.
Noah?
I think problems arising is just part of production, right? Something's going to come up. And so as a leader, you just got to give that space for your team to step up to the plate, so to speak. And, have a pocket of time where you don't helicopter parent them or whatever, you want to describe that as, so that you give them that freedom and flexibility to troubleshoot, and they're not looking at you like, oh, are you about to step in? It's like, no, you have that moment. If you can create a sandbox situation where they don't have to, crash a whole client and millions or thousands of dollars get lost or what have you. But yeah, you got to create those situations for your team.
Go ahead, Sky.
Mike Rowe from Deadliest Catch, he was the voiceover, and he was actually on one of the ships at one time in the Alaska Straits while they were catching these crabs. And he looks at all the equipment flying around, and he looks at Serge, the captain, and says, "OSHA?" And the captain looks back at him and says, "Son, I'm here to make you rich, not to keep you safe." So I think the question that is being asked here is trust. And so if you are trying to create a long-term relationship with that person, then yeah, how you deal with that situation is going to, potentially, be a long-term question. But I think, what is your mutual priorities?
Good. Guy?
Yeah, I remember hearing at a place I worked at in 1995, a service bureau, that we're auditioning a candidate, and he was going to be working second shift. And so he had to be able to troubleshoot on his own. So they purposely took out one of the system extensions for printing, and the box was with the discs, the floppy disks, were on the shelf and pretty close to where they were interviewing him. and he figured it out. Like, he was able to actually make the printer print. These were huge color copiers that cost a lot of money. But I was super impressed that the guy got up from the desk, walked over, grabbed the disc, inserted it, made a print and output, so it's pretty amazing to see that firsthand. But I've never done that to anybody, where it's a pretty stiff interview to take away somebody's drivers and then make them output. Like, that's pretty hardcore.
In some training environments, definitely not in a production environment, I have absolutely done a variety of things to sabotage the team as in rehearsal days, mostly to watch how they find the answer. Like, there's a systematic way to do it, and then there's the let's change everything and get panicked and get all ruffled and everything else. And so the kind of things that I do, of course, are disconnect things, reset to factory default. This is a really good one for just walking around random equipment, just resetting it to factory default. Those are kind of, and what happens is that what I want to see them do is reduce the variables and start building variables back up. So go to one end of the pipeline or the other and start working their way systematically through works here, works here, works here, works here, doesn't work here. Okay, this is where we look, and so you want to watch that, and then you have conversations about it. I will say that one of the things, I was in art school for about a quarter. I went to an art school, and by the second quarter, they had me teaching the Photoshop classes. And so I was like, okay, I can't, there's no reason for me to be here anymore. But the one thing that definitely stuck in my head was that there was one power cable to all of the computers. There was one switch that controlled all the power to the computer, and the teacher about once a week would turn it off. Like, just hit the switch while we were working. And you just lose whatever you didn't save. And I got to tell you, I always saved after that. Like, I didn't think about it as much. I'd get into something, I'd whatever, but I saved version after version after version after that experience. And so, that kind of thing definitely is important to think about, as put people under, pressure of failure. Just got to do it in a safe way, not in your productions. Next question.
And Tobias also asks, what size nanlight pavotube is necessary to light up an office hours type background? What other good options are out there?
The pavotube is a great, the smallest one will do a great job, with it. It just depends on how much light you want or need. And a lot of that has to do with the exposure. So if you're really well exposed in the foreground, you end up in the back end, it's a balance between the foreground and the background of how large or how bright that light needs to be. I would say one or two of the little 1 foot ones is probably enough. I wouldn't use the bigger ones because they're harder to manage. So I'm using a mixed panel just because I have one, and I don't think I have it on right now. I forgot to turn it on, so it's not on. So anyway, so you can also use it, as you can see here, you can also use it without the pavotube, without any backlight, and it looks okay too. All right, the next question.
And we're going to Tony Mobley from Newton. I'm using audio monitors for the first time. I'm assuming Tony means the in-ear monitors. Please share best use case. Should they only be used when doing serious broadcasts? They seem delicate. I want to take good care of them.
Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I believe it's using the sidekicks, and they come with different change out, what do you call them? There's satellite, a cone-shaped one, and a Christmas tree. And depending on which one you use will determine how much of the outside world that you hear. So you really got to play with each one, and they're delicate to take off. So you want to be careful with them. But once you get them right for the right production, they're amazing because they're so discreet. So you have people coming up to you, you can still hear them. It's a nice blend. And plus they sound really good compared to, like, you can hear nuances, you can hear little high details that some of the cheap, like $10 in-ears just don't have. There's fidelity there instead of just trash. So I would recommend playing with the different caps.
Yeah, I use the one that is just the cone, and it works really well. I mean, they are incredibly, comfortable, and they are pretty durable. I use them every day for everything, so I'm constantly taking them on and off, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. I do take care with them, and I have a little place. I have a headphone, like a little place you put your headphone that clamps onto my desk, and I just. I have one of these. So this is what I have here, and I open it up, and you put your headphones on it. I mean, that's what it's built for, but I use it for a variety of different things. But one of the things I do is this is what I on my desk. This is what I hang my these little headphones on. I just need somewhere to put them. If you don't have somewhere to put them, they end up getting piled and something happens to them. So I found that with other ones, not with these ones, fortunately, but with other ones, I've run over them with my chair. I've done a bunch of other things with them because I just didn't have a place. You know, they were sitting on the desk. They fell off the desk. The desk ran over them. Not on sidekicks. Thank goodness. Much cheaper ones. So, but giving them somewhere to go is important so that you don't run them over. They are delicate in that sense. Go ahead, Tony.
So, as I said, this is my first use case for them. Should I plug them into my Zoom H6 or directly into the Mac Mini?
I have them plugged into my mixer, and the reason I do that is because it is I can hear myself. So if you plug them into the Mac Mini, you won't have any side tone. If you plug them into the H6, depending on how you configure it, you should be able to hear side tone. Side tone being yourself. So I don't know the H6 well enough to know how to do that, but you should be able to hear yourself while you talk as well, because I have them in both ears, and so when I have in both ears, the only way I can hear myself is through the mixer. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Next question.
And our next one comes from Rupert McRae. Production truck or production trailer? Discuss.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Neither. I use vMix. I carry it all in a toolbox. I don't need either.
There we go. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, it's definitely debatable. You want to use the tool that you need, obviously. But for me, I ended up settling on a trailer. Let me see if I can pull that up here. Nope, maybe not. Okay. Anyway, yeah. So basically, I custom designed it and got all the tools and all the things that I needed to fit my needs. And it's going to depend on what you need and what you fit in it. The trailer's nice because I could pull it with my truck, and I don't need extra equipment.
How big is the trailer? How long is it?
It's 16 feet.
Mm-hmm.
So
you got a trailer there. So that's there's your trailer. And what did it start as? Is it? Okay, got it. So it's like a toy hauler.
Yeah, it's a toy hauler. It was built by Solaires, and here I'll show another picture here. So what's nice about it is it also has seats that double as beds, and they also go up to the top. So you can actually remove it for these grip carts here. But depending on the setup that I need, I'll basically, push in what I need and carry that around. And then the carts that come out of it were also custom made and designed from the ground up. So it's all on wheels. So, you wheel in and set up and go. And so basically I was looking at larger productions and how they did their setup and kind of created my own setup based off of that. So that's the trailer side of the debate. I don't know if someone has a production truck side of the debate, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, so I've used a little bit of both. So we've definitely had trailers and we've rented trucks. I've never owned a trailer. I never owned a truck, but I have. I've rented a lot of them. I can show. Let's see if you can make me co-host. I'm not sure if I am. I can show a picture of our trailer, of what it looked like inside. Oh, let's see here. Can you, Stuart, or who's cutting? Or Sky, can you make me co-host? There we go. So this is just one shot of it. So this was a Markertech trailer that we upgraded a lot. So what we did is this is a 30-foot or 26-foot, I think, toy hauler. Audio typically was in the back, but we learned to move Brian up here. So we replaced all the tables that come with that 26-foot with I think they call it a 30-foot, but it's really 26. We replaced these with IKEA because it gave us an extra 18 inches on the end. And it was just a nicer table. We put all these monitors along the side. And so that was some of the advantages to it. As a all-in-one, the big advantage of the trailer was we could just drive up and we were ready to go pretty quickly. It allows you to have everything all pre-built. It's all built into the whole thing and the way we like to do it. One of the advantages of trailers over trucks is that they have a lower power draw. And because of that, we were able to have a UPS inside of our trailer that was that could carry the whole trailer for about 15 minutes. And that is a huge deal if you get someone accidentally unplugs, one of your legs, that kind of thing. Now, when we upgraded this, it came with 50 amps. We put a 100 amp 3-phase into it so that with distribution. So we could power the sat truck, and you just give us the pipe, 3-phase 100 amp, and then we could send it wherever it needed to go to make that work. So the trailer was really nice in that sense. It fits into a lot of places. It's a lot less expensive to have one. Ours was probably, I think the one that we had was probably not more than $250,000 of equipment. Most trucks are $8 million. That's kind of like, what you kind of like, if you think about a 54 double expando, you're talking about $8 million of gear to make it all, kind of run, and people can make them for less, but they're big investments. The big thing with, the trailers are great when you're compact. It's a relatively simple show. You can make it work. Trucks provide a lot of chairs. So when you get into a big old truck, a 54 double expando, the big thing is that you have a lot of places for people. We were just in a truck I was in a 35-foot straight over the weekend, and it was good. It's a truck, but it was small, and it doesn't expand out and feels a little cramped, compared to a big old 54-foot double expando, which is what a lot of the big trucks are. So the truck provides you a lot of infrastructure. It allows you to set up very quickly. It gives you a lot of tools. You can throw in a couple EVS operators. You can have you can have places for the director. You can have the TD and the assistant TD. You can have all that stuff is all in there, and it just takes and you can set up in a day. For a very complicated show, you can show up at 8 o'clock in the morning, or let's say 6 o'clock in the morning, for an evening event. And oftentimes, a lot of times, there's a main truck and then there's a B truck. The B comes in. The B carries all the cameras and all the other, all the B unit has everything that you need to support the truck. So all the cabling and everything else, and then the truck's all fully routed, and it's got lots of patch panels, and you can do a lot of things with it. So I think that they're two different. There's definitely shows that I do that we need a truck. Like we're not gonna do this with a trailer. And then there's definitely shows that we do that are, and then, again, the trucks are more comfortable in a lot of ways of just, as far as working through it. And then there's ones that we do trailers, and then occasionally there are ones that we do. There's definitely still stuff we do with fly packs, which are just, we just load in. But I have to admit, when you get used to, I went from, little milk crates of stuff to Pelican cases to road cases to a trailer to a truck, and I know how to do all of those things, and I can still do all of those things, but I definitely pick which one. It's not that I always want to do one or the other, but I very carefully pick which one that I want to use for each mission. Go ahead, Noah.
Right tool for the job for sure. And then on the bigger productions, I'm sure you're doing separate honey wagons or bathrooms, separate from the trailer. Usually,
at the facility locations that we bring the truck to, there's lots of infrastructure. so we're not. So like we're not. We don't have to. We don't
picture a honey wagon / production truck, and that's scaring me.
Yeah. So, yeah.
I do have a small bathroom in my trailer and a shower, but
right.
Yeah, so it can double as whatever.
Yeah, we don't do that because it's usually we're now bringing in teams, and there's hotels and there's things and
bigger stuff for sure.
Infrastructure. So we worry about less, but yeah, those things can get really nice. So when people put it, all right, next question.
And we are going to scroll up so we can actually see the question. Tony Mobley asks, best way to add 3 monitors to Mac Mini M1? And the perfect person to have an answer to this is not in the panel, so we'll try this. Fenwick.
It doesn't work with him. So I think that what Fenwick would tell you is to probably use these pluggable display links. So Pluggable makes this display link that is it is a USB-C into your computer with 2 HDMI outs. And if you plugged this in, you'll get 2 of the 3 monitors that you need, and then you have another HDMI that's coming out of the Mac Mini. So I think that this pluggable device, and this one specifically, we talked about it yesterday, is the USB-C 6550U, 6950U is the one that Fenwick uses, that Andy Carluccio discovered, and that I'm testing. so those are, but that's probably one of those would get you to 3 monitors with your setup there. Rupert?
I was just wondering in that scenario why you would bring only one monitor out of the Mac Mini and then use 2 on the display link. Why not bring 2 out of the Mac Mini and just have 1 on that display link?
Because, well, you have to use this to get to 2. I guess it's how many you have the HDMI in this. I wouldn't want to give up. This allows you to have 3. Like this one will split it out. If you have the other 2, I don't think this will work. I think that's the issue. So anyway, next question.
And Tony also asks, any hiccups so far with iOS 15 update?
Go ahead, Serge.
I've been using iOS 15 and my iPhone 8 since a few weeks without problem, and even updated my primary iPhone last week. So no issue for me.
Great. Jeffrey?
All camera options and audio options opened up perfect. Only problem I had was actually with the iPad, the new tile system where you can add in the weather and things like that. One of the tiles went off to the top left corner for a little bit, but then after I rebooted, it corrected itself. Other than that, no other problems.
Go, Jason.
iOS has been extremely stable, I think, throughout the beta cycle, at least this time. I do not put beta on my main units, my main iPhone, my main iPad. I did that yesterday, and it was fine. It was perfect.
A little scary, but fine. Next question.
And regular office hours producer Douglas Carmichael asks, Rupert refers to Facebook portals and the like as Zoom Room devices. Do they run the same Zoom Room software as used in the cloud and in physical rooms?
Go ahead, Rupert.
So the Zoom Rooms software can be installed on PC-based hardware or Mac-based hardware and put into a conference room, for example. You can also get Zoom Room appliances that have embedded software. Now, the interface looks the same and they provide largely the same functions, but the software is embedded. So it looks similar, but there's 2 different ways of getting to that route. On the personal devices, again, the interface looks very similar and provides a similar set of functionality. With the personal devices, you can't have all the external peripherals, or not all of them. So it looks similar, but there's different ways of getting to it.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, there's just a lot more that you can dig into. Rupert's right. They look the same. Like this one here behind me is the Facebook portal. So it's got the touch screen, but when you start to do things like you want to add another camera, this device won't do it. The little Fire Cube will allow you to add a camera and be able to actually add 2 cameras and switch between them. But some of the things that you can do in a full Zoom room, like pick which display has what content. So active speaker or a certain speaker or shared screen, or what happens when somebody shares screen or gallery view. So those ones you're going to pay for. You're going to pay $49 a month. And then you can also get NDI out of the full-blown Zoom rooms, which is a nice feature. So it just depends on what you want to do with it. So one's free. The other one is also what we refer to as a Zoom in the back end calls it a personal collaboration device. So right now you can see that I just have one hooked up, and that's the Amazon Fire Cube, but it does not have all the features that the settings that if I go in here and I say, edit this, you could see that it's pretty, there's not nearly as much as there is on the other back end. The other back end has way more things that you can do on this device. Actually, this one does have, so this portal, you can hook up a second display to this one, and you can hook up what happens. This is what it looks like if you want to say, when 2 people join, I want to pick gallery view to be on the other display. So some you can hook up Ethernet to, like this one, you kind of have to choose Ethernet or HDMI. It won't allow you to do 2. So there's just certain things that you can do with the full-blown Zoom room versus a personal collaboration device, and what hardware. Like you would get the same back end on a little 8-inch portal, but you can't hook up a USB-C device because it has no USB-C port. So it just depends on which device. You can't do the same thing with an Echo or the Google Home either. So it just depends on which one you want to get.
Next question.
And we're back to Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas. Will FiLMiC Pro stream AirPlay to an Apple TV over a wired Ethernet connection?
Go ahead, Jason.
Yes.
Will it though? I thought, but you still need the Wi-Fi to negotiate, right?
You still need the Wi-Fi to negotiate the connection, but the throughput, you will get all of the benefit of the direct connection.
And this is where we assume that when you say I want to stream something, you're actually doing a screen capture of your device. Because when you say I actually want to stream a streaming video, that's not what happens. It doesn't. I mean, what it does is it hands the manifest from the manifest is the description of the app. So if you say I want to stream something from YouTube, or if I'm watching something and I want to stream it, if there's a manifest involved, it'll just throw it over to the Apple TV and start running. So it's not actually going through the phone and to the TV, which is why sometimes YouTube doesn't work because of the way that that interchange works. Yeah, next question.
And we were going to Danny Law. I had already hit the done button because somebody updated the panel and I see the answer button now.
Yeah.
It's lovely seeing that. Okay, so Danny Law asked, being that most people tend to explore on using USB-C display adapters, how many monitors can each USB-C from the computer support without overwhelming it? I didn't see any hands up, but I think it's just one HDMI port is built into USB-C.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
When you're using a hub, I've seen some hubs that claim that they can do 2 4Ks plus an additional 1080p. 3 monitors is what I would do for any type of hub. Even if they're all 1080p monitors, you don't want to go past that because it's not just about the resolution; it's about the power of the hub, and you'll probably be overloading the hub at that point.
Next question.
We're going to Chris Wildner from Lafayette, Indiana. I hope I'm getting the states right. What's the current recommendation for an iOS app to send 1080 or 4K feed out to rtmp, larix, or any other suggestions?
I think that larix is the only one that I know of, the only one I've seen used recently. So I think that larix is probably your best bet to do a pure rtmp stream. Next question.
We're going to Daniel McFarland in Belfast, UK. And it scrolled up on my window. I need to convert the frame rate from my ATEM Television Studio HD for display on a number of older TVs. Would it be better to use an ATEM Mini for this conversion or a dedicated scaler such as a Decimator MD-HX?
Go ahead, Jason.
I'm going to save you some money. The Blackmagic up-down cross will do this beautifully.
Go ahead, Serge.
I will say the same thing as Jason. I have experience with the AJA UDC. The only advantage I know of the AJA is buffering the last frame. So if you have a bad SDI feed, it's a good way to resolve that problem. It will not crash the recording because you will still receive a frame until the feed come back.
I will say that if you have a lot of ATEM Minis doing the conversion for you, you now have a lot of ATEM Minis. so anyway, next question.
And we're going to Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California. Has anyone found a portable monitor that has a built-in image flip for a teleprompter? And I think Noah, the Field Worlds have on some of them.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Yep, I'm using the Field World, and that certainly has the flip function. I also had a older eYoYo monitor here. This one doesn't flip, but I'm told that the newer versions do. So just check out the specs. This is like a 10-inch, I think.
Yeah, and I believe a lot of the Liliputs will do it as well. They're built into it. They're kind of hidden in their menus, but they do have it there. Next question.
And also an answer for Noah is some of the small HD monitors for cinematographers will also do it. Gordon Lake in Los Angeles, California asks, what SDI cable would you recommend for carrying a 3G HD signal up to 300 feet in a live production, which is about 100 meters?
Go ahead, Noah.
I would actually recommend doing custom cables. And so you can actually buy a spool. The one I've bought several times before is the Belden. So you want to just make sure you match the heads to the cable itself. There's like a 4.5G, which will do up to 4K 30 frames a second that I've used several times, and I think that works pretty well. That would be my recommendation.
I would recommend single mode fiber. So
Yeah.
Anything over 150 feet, I'm like, and we're now going to move to fiber. All right, next question.
And we're back to Chris Wildner in Lafayette. Gencon 2021 was this past weekend. Virtual productions for board strategy games seem hit and miss. Would the virtual production technique simplify these types of events?
I don't know. Board games are hard. We've shot some. You now need multiple cameras. You need to figure out where you're, at least from where the point of view of the person sitting. It's kind of like when you look at a poker game, there's a lot of cameras, to do for
so
the
much
table.
easier to shoot a racing game, a video game.
Yeah, the hard part with virtual production techniques, I mean, you definitely could in the sense that you could have multiple people cutting the show, but there's a physical need there that's a little bit different because you have to see what's going on. Go ahead, Noah, real quick.
Yeah, I was producing a Dungeons and Dragons YouTube channel show, and yeah, that was definitely a challenge. We used tablets and tried to have the players update their stats and stuff, but that didn't work so well. So,
next question. Yep, go ahead, Stuart. Can't hear you.
Oh, I understand, Bill. I understand. Jan in Canada asks, hi, I've got an AverMedia PW313 webcam and was wondering if the frames per second in YUV2 or YUY2 mode is really limited to 5 like OBS says. And there's the link for the AverMedia PW313.
It's very possible. It's very possible that one of these webcams would run at a very low frame rate. You may also want to look at whether it is, whether you're in low light, take it outside and try it. Because it may be shifting down and adding motion blur for a lower light situation, and then increasing. For some of these webcams, they do a lot of funky things to send out to get image out that looks like it's well lit. Next question.
And Douglas is back with another question. If audio is going through my SoundGrid network, how can I make sure audio and video are synchronized when feeding into Zoom through disparate paths? Should I use mimoLive to align them before sending them to Zoom?
You probably want to, well, it depends on where you want to put the delay. You could also put it into your most audio mixers are going to have some way to do the delay. And usually we would do it there if we can. We do it on the last leg if we have to. But if you're going through some kind of SoundGrid, I would do it that way. Next question.
And we're going to Craig Kadoki from Toronto, Canada. Audio mixer control surfaces. What's new and what are the must-have features and control protocols?
Anyone have any strong opinions about what you have to have? I would say faders. Faders are useful. Go ahead, Jason.
Oh, yeah. I'm all about the motorized faders, and I'm all about the OLED channel labels.
Yeah, scribble pads are super important, in the process of knowing what you're actually looking at. So just lights is one thing, but really having, a scribble patch or scribble pads across the top that you can have names on, sometimes little symbols and things like that really do help in that process. Having some kind of LCD that's telling you what you're doing per channel. You'd think that people wouldn't leave that out, but they do. so anyway, so those things, the motorized faders are definitely important of knowing the connection between the what's actually happening in the mixer and the position of those makes a difference. Next question.
Hey, my own one got voted up far enough. Sith Lord Snark speaking. Anyone know of a Thunderbolt 2 dongle or hub that allows 2 or more Thunderbolt 1 or 2 devices, as in version 1 or 2, to connect to a laptop? And this is a Lenovo laptop, not a Mac.
Go ahead, Jason.
Okay, this is going to depend very heavily on the frame or on the firmware that Lenovo actually supported. PC was, when they were developing it, basically was Lightwave instead of Thunderbolt. And long story short, the Thunderbolt 2 dock, Express dock, is your best bet. I can send you a link, but yeah, your results may vary.
Yep. All right, next question.
I shall look forward to seeing the link. And Douglas Carmichael is back with, could you see the use of Meccana in education helping to build better communication within a class? And, hang on, I missed something. And as the higher voted questions flow to the top.
Ari?
Yeah, I won't address Mukana specifically, just generally in this case. A plus could be that it would definitely help, specifically in a virtual environment, helping moderate the discussion, making sure that everyone is heard. A minus of sorts could be that the voting down option could be misused, depending on the environment. So I would look out for that.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to solve the voting down problem. One is that you have to build systems into the architecture to see ganging behavior. So, Boolean behaviors usually happen with a series of people, and if the system is paying attention to it, it can see these three people always push this person's vote down, and then it can just give you little red flags like these people are all working together, and so those are the kind of things that you can do. You can actually, when you turn those dials up, you can make it almost impossible to bully people because the big eye can see everything, and so we've used it in past iterations, not in the current Mukana, but in past iterations of this kind of thing, and they're really effective. And you don't tell people that, you just suddenly know that these four people work in unison all the time. And when you have large numbers of people, what you do is you just ignore them. Like as soon as they start acting as a group, you just start ignoring their votes. So because they're you just wash them out. So it's the easiest way to do it rather than doing something overt. Go ahead, Noah.
You could also put like a cap on the negative vote, so it only shows the maximum of like -2 or something. That way,
you could.
It's not overwhelming.
The vast majority of negative votes that we've had are questions that are just either not well formed or not something that the whole group wants to hear. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with them. It just means that the group gets to decide what we're going to talk about as a group. Then what we've done is also have breakouts where we talk to individual people about the questions that didn't get necessarily voted up, but are stuff that we can still address. It's just that we should address it in a smaller group as opposed to the larger group. You can also track things like everybody who voted it up. I could say we're doing a breakout right now, and if you're interested, we'll just pull you all in. The 15, there might be 18 people that said no, 15 people that said yes. We can pull those 15 into a group and discuss it. So, just because we don't want to have it in the general doesn't mean we don't track it or even give people the ability to address it individually. The big thing is being able to get 90% of the people, answered when you question, when you're answering the right questions for everyone. All right, we're going to kick a couple of these back, and Stuart, I'm going to take over for the Q&A for the thing. Thanks you so much for jumping in there and taking on the first hour there. We're going.
Thank you. You're most welcome. And now I can get to my cookies.
That we have to keep our priorities straight here. All right, so we're going to change subjects now and jump into our second hour. And it was really interesting. This hour, we're going to be talking to Paul Terpstra from Klover, and Klover. Paul jumped into Discord. He was talking about some stuff, and then he and I started going back and forth. And I grew up fascinated by parabolic microphones, and so I was like, oh, you should come on. we should get you on here and answer some questions for us. And so Paul has been kind enough to jump on. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit, how did you get into parabolic microphones?
It's a very interesting story. And if you don't mind, I will do a little. I'm a mechanical engineer and spent almost all of my career in automated assembly equipment. So I am not an audio engineer. To be honest, I have pretty bad hearing because I spent a lot of time around radio-controlled model airplanes.
Oh, there you go.
And so my high frequency especially is pretty bad. But right out of college, first job I had back in the early 80s, they said, we have a corporate mandate to use an IBM robot, figure out how to use it. And I developed this little machine that plugged circuit breakers into a test stand and then put them into packing trays. So there was a poor lady plugging these things in and out and in and out and in and out all day long. So anyway, I did the mechanical design, the electrical design, programmed it, pretty much the whole thing. And it was like, I watched the thing come to life and I just didn't want to do anything else after that. So that's how I got started, if you will, in my career. Then I moved to a large automation integrator. That's actually what you see as a picture of the machine. that machined all the mounting points for the plastic panels on the Pontiac Transport. So it was basically a 117 axis CNC machine. And you talked a little earlier about, unplugging things. There was actually one of the engineers from General Motors that, as the machine was running, would unplug servo motor cables just to see what would happen. We didn't care much for him, but we didn't break anything either.
We did. There we go. Go ahead.
Later on in my career, I ended up being director of research and development for this company. This is one of the last big systems that I worked on. What you're seeing is a diesel fuel injector. So like the Ford Expeditions, the Triton diesels. You have clearances in there of, microns between the plungers and the bores and so forth. We were putting those together. There was two identical systems with, I believe it was 7 modules each. And we got one in fuel injector every 7 seconds. No human interaction other than loading parts.
Right.
Even the wiring harness, which was the real challenge. So anyway, that's my background.
So how did this background end up in audio?
Okay, well, after I left that company, the company was bought out by ThyssenKrupp, and I was pretty sure it was going to be split up and so forth. So I left the company and started an engineering consulting firm. One of my customers was a company called, well, at that point, it was called Kernwer, and their niche was stages. So like there you see the stage that was used at Super Bowl 47, and his niche was stages that would fold and bend and roll to get out of the way so people could see the game. This is a stage that I did for Super Bowl 45. All these sorts of things have to be analyzed so that they don't fall down and kill people. I'm a licensed engineer, so I can sign off on those. This is a stage that we built for Arthur Ashe Stadium. So that's how I got working with the owner of Kernwer, which now he has transitioned to a company called ModTruss, which you might see for mobile or modular staging on occasion. In 2011, one of the audio submixers went to Fox Sports and said, we could get a lot better on-field sound if we had a dish that was a true parabolic. Because if you see any dish on the sideline of a football game that has a colored Lexan, it's a company called Crystal Partners. They called their product the Big Ears. It was a hemisphere. It wasn't a true parabolic. So the audio was, the range wasn't as good. The clarity wasn't as good. So
and what makes the parabolic better?
We'll get to that in a second. Okay.
Okay.
So the Fox audio guys, they went to all the suppliers that were supplying product to Fox and said, are you interested in making a new parabolic microphone? Well, my customer that was doing stages said, will you design a parabolic microphone for us? I didn't know anything about parabolic microphones, but it never stopped me before. So we built a prototype in 2011, and in early 2012, Fox came back and said, we want 50 for next season. It wasn't a stage and it wasn't an engineering product, so jointly we formed Klover Products to make parabolics. The name Klover actually comes from the shape that's in the side of a mod truss. If you're familiar with the mod truss, he calls that his clover. So that's where Klover comes from. Since then, in 2018, my wife and I were able to buy him out. So now we own the company outright. It keeps us very busy. The engineering business is pretty much almost concluded. I do a few finite element projects and expert witness projects, but otherwise I'm full-time on Klover. Okay, as far as your question, the definition, if you will, parabolic mics are really a misnomer. It's a parabolic collector with a microphone at the focus point. So if you buy the dish from us, we call it a parabolic microphone, but it doesn't include the element, it's the collector. Like that Sony that Stuart has behind him, you buy the collector and you add your own microphone, but you call it a parabolic microphone. So with a true parabolic shape, all the sound, as you see on that little diagram, is reflected to one single point. And hopefully this will make it a little more easy to understand. You can see how all the pressure waves start out in line, and as they bounce off the dish and back to the microphone, they all reach the microphone at the same point. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
That's what happens when you have a dish that's not a true parabolic. You have different sound energies bouncing to different points. So now you have basically the sound energy is getting garbled. It's not focused. It's like having the lens on your camera out of focus. So your amplification is greatly reduced and your clarity is greatly reduced. So that's basically, that picture right there is basically what put us in business, because Crystal Partners refused to change the shape of their dish. So Fox went out to look for somebody that would.
So that basically for forever that people were making these hemispheres, and they were better than any other mic, but they weren't perfect. Like they were fine with good enough. Like it does better than pointing a shotgun mic at it from the distance that it works, but it wasn't really what you were solving is the next problem, which was that it, how do you get all of it to focus?
It was good enough to pick up the clash of the pads on a football field, but not necessarily good enough, to capture a human conversation or anything like that.
Right.
So yeah, it sort of worked. And we found out later that years before, CBS had actually made some true parabolic microphones, and for whatever reason, they got put in a warehouse and forgotten about or whatever, and never were used again. And that's big ears moved in, and they became the 600-pound gorilla in that area.
Mm-hmm.
So this probably makes no sense whatsoever, but I think of a parabolic microphone as a crescent wrench. If you can use a radio mic like you guys have right in front of your mic, definitely use it. But if it doesn't work, if you can't mic somebody up, if you can't put a wireless mic on your speaker, if you have, for whatever reason, the traditional microphones don't work, that's like the case where you have a 10-millimeter bolt and a 3/8 inch wrench. If it doesn't go together, you grab a crescent wrench because you can adjust and suit your needs. So, I get all the time, well, why would I use it when I can use a wireless? Well, if the wireless works for you, that's fine, use it, and, I'm happy for you. But a parabolic mic can be used for a lot of situations that are tough for the traditional microphones. Since you mentioned it earlier, I am speaking to you through my little 9-inch parabolic up there. I've not done any equalization in the ATEM. I know that's possible. A couple of you have mentioned it sounded a little thin. That can be adjusted, like anything else. I just wanted to show you what it sounded like right out of the mic with no equalization. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Pros and cons. Obviously, the parabolic provides the mechanical amplification because you're taking the sound energy from a large area, focusing it onto one single point. Because you're amplifying what's ahead and not amplifying what's off to the side, it becomes more directional, and we'll spend a lot of more time on that. The cons, I'm the first to admit that the frequency response is not flat. That's the first thing that people mention. Their amplification is low at lower frequencies, and that has all to do with physics, but I don't necessarily agree with the standard explanation of why that is, and we can talk that in after hours if we want. But being a mechanical engineer and not an audio engineer, I come at things a little differently and think about things a little differently. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's bad. The other problem with parabolic microphones that you need to be aware of is that you'll have reflected sound. So if, for example, you have a speaker that's blasting out bouncing off the back wall and coming back into your parabolic microphone, you'll get an instant feedback loop. So they're very difficult to use for sound reinforcement. They're great for streaming or recording, but if you're going to go into a PA system, it's really, really tough. Okay. I'm not, again, sure, you know, the level of expertise, but all microphones have a polar pattern. I talked about directionality. A polar pattern determines or shows what your directionality is. The one thing that a lot of people forget about when they look at a polar pattern is that it's logarithmic. So if you change by 6 on the log scale, you've doubled your amplification. So when you look at these scales or these plots, you have to kind of visually or mentally adjust for that. So it's more distorted than what the chart may first appear. Okay, we'll just go through the different types real quick. Omnidirectional obviously is the same pickup from all directions. It's you know, good for certain situations. It's good for lapels where you don't want to have to worry about whether it's pointed at your mouth or not. Cardioid mic is very common. There's actually a lot of the low-end shotguns that are really cardioids, even though, you know, they call themselves a shotgun, it's a cardioid. So they're quite wide. If you look at how many degrees you have to go out before it drops 6 decibels, you're out, you know, 90 degrees almost. Hypercardioid is more directional, but there are usually pretty good sized rear nodes that you have to take into consideration. A lot of the mid-range shotguns are hypercardioid. And then low bar, if you go to your high-end shotguns, you'll see a low bar pattern. They show on the pattern very directional. You know, you go off 15 degrees and you're down 17, 18 decibels. That's quite a bit. The thing that you have to be careful of is that these graphs are frequency dependent. So if you keep this little chart right here in mind, if you go, this is what that same microphone looks like when you look at the full polar plot. So that shape that you had before, which was nice and narrow in the center, is at 16 kilohertz. When you get down to 2 kilohertz, you're way out here, and 4 kilohertz is over here. So again, you have to be sure that when you're looking at a polar chart, you're considering the frequencies that you're, you know, interested in. Unless you're shooting birds, you're probably not all that interested in 16 kilohertz. So the polar plots are a little bit misleading when you see something like that and you think, oh man, that shotgun is really hyper-focused, hyper-directional. It's only when you're at the really high frequencies that it's that directional. So again, you have to be a little careful. I throw this in there just to show what gets sold as a shotgun. That's basically a plastic tube with some paper around it with a microphone at the end of the tube. I won't say whose that is, but you can probably take a guess. You might as well put a standard cardioid microphone on top of your camera. You'll have the same results. Okay. Again, I'm an engineer. We created polar plots. I don't think in the last 9 years that I've been working with parabolic microphones, I've been able to find a polar plot for a parabolic microphone. So I created my own.
How did you create it?
I created this test bed out in we have a kind of a field in the backyard. I put posts in 10-degree increments at 25 and 50-foot distances from the parabolic. You can't see it in this picture, but I have an amplifier sitting just off to the side of the parabolic microphone with a long cable. And I actually take the speaker, a reference studio speaker, and move it from post to post to post to post. And then we do if you see this frequency here, I do a step. I do 2 seconds of 64 hertz, 2 seconds of 125 hertz, 2 seconds of 250, 2 seconds of 500, all the way up to 16 kilohertz. Then I take it back into Audacity and Smart, if you're familiar with Smart, and look at where those frequency peaks are. To be honest, I've been working on trying to perfect this process for the last 8 years, because if you go inside of a gym, you have reflected sound. If you go out in the country, you have birds, you have
you need a very, very, very large anechoic chamber.
Right.
Like just
I know the Air Force has one that's big enough to put a whole plane in, but they haven't lent it to me yet.
There's a couple of them that are that big. The Air Force isn't the only one. But yeah.
So basically what I did was played around with the gains and the output of the speaker to make sure that my frequencies were always higher than whatever ambient noise, unless an airplane flew directly overhead at the wrong time. So I can filter out the ambient noise. That's how we did the testing. We're going to put these on our website. I know, people don't trust people. If anybody wants to sit through 2 hours of tone steps, they can certainly have access to the audio files.
That's great.
So this, again, going backwards, is the polar chart for our 26-inch parabolic microphone compared to the Sennheiser ME67, which is the polar, the low bar pattern on the left.
Right.
So the one thing that I hope you can see is the scale on my chart is from 25 to minus 35. The scale on theirs is 0 to 25. And this is the polar chart of the microphone and the parabolic. So if you put a microphone that has more amplification, more sensitivity inside the parabolic microphone, everything will grow. If you put a microphone inside the parabolic microphone that has a goofy curve on the frequency curve, that will also be passed on to, through this chart.
Yep.
So we'll be making charts with different microphones. One of the questions always is, what type of microphone do I have to use in it? So I'm going to make a polar chart instead of an omni using a cardioid, so that you can see how it affects the amplification at different frequencies. So stay tuned, follow my YouTube channels, follow the blogs, whatever. There'll be more coming.
You can come and hang out with us on After Hours when you come up with something.
Okay, we'll do that. We'll let people know when there's more stuff.
When you're shooting it too, available. I bet this is the kind of thing that we would love to have you just put a phone out there.
We
jump
are
on
your
After
kind
Hours
of nerds.
Yeah, like we'd all just sit there and just watch you build the test.
That's why I figured you would like the pictures of the machinery, because I figured those were the kind of the people that were here.
Oh yeah.
So anyway, I just wanted to show you how much tighter the pattern is at most of the frequencies compared to a low bar shotgun.
Yeah.
And then this, again, people always talk about the frequency curve. This was the frequency curve of at 0 degrees straight ahead of the parabolic, how the amplification varied as you changed frequencies. And what you'll see is that from 250 hertz down, yes, we lose a lot. That can be boosted, but that's just the physics involved. From 250 to 16K, it's a nice linear progression. And that's 10 dB from 250 to 16K. So it's very easy in Audacity, Audition, whatever you're using to create a nice straight line equalizer to balance that out. Okay, that's the large one. This is the small one. There's a few little peaks and valleys in here. I'm still trying to understand. The 9-inch does have that metal frame, so I know some of it has to do with the metal frame blocking the sound energy.
Right.
But again, at the low frequencies, it's very omnidirectional looking, but at the lower frequencies, you go to where you're actually, significantly reducing the amplification versus a 20 dB amplification. So, and there again, that's the frequency curve. I'm going to I just finished up this chart last night, to be honest, so I'm going to go back and double check before I publish it. But again, it's fairly easy to manage. And again, you can see that at 90 degrees off axis, how fast that falls off or what the difference is.
Right.
Okay. Again, we talked about the testing process. We have 3 models of it, basically 3 sizes available. The 26-inch is what you see at football games. Any football that's on Fox, college football, whatever, will be using our 26-inch. The 16-inch, we normally say that has a 250 to 300 foot range. And range is so subjective because it depends on how large your subject is, how much ambient noise you're dealing with. So when we talk about range, we're talking about being in a corn, a wheat field out away from everything, normal conversation. We can hear it from 500 to 600 feet with the big one.
I just love the wheat field lab.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I jokingly say that Lambeau Field is my R&D lab because whenever I have something new that I want to play with, the people at Fox are usually nice enough to let me come out for the weekend.
That's great.
The little 9-inch, we normally say 30 to 50 feet. We have had wedding videographers get bows from 50 feet. We've had, as you can see, 6 feet or less, it gives a amplification fairly equivalent to having someone wearing a lapel mic. The nice thing that really surprised me is that if I turn my head, I can usually get less of a drop off than if I'm wearing a lapel mic. So that's a kind of a side benefit that I wasn't really anticipating. I jokingly call this the bumblebee model because according to all the formulas and everything that everybody ever said about parabolic microphones, it shouldn't work. I was just too dumb to know better. So I went ahead and made it. Okay, then our 4th version, if you will, is a consumer version of the 9-inch. It's just for a soccer mom, if she wants to record her kid playing soccer, you can put the microphone in with this little snap-in clip. I'm having a hard time. There we go. The microphone just snaps in. It's very easy to take the microphone in and out. You've got the little circle as a kind of an aiming device from the back. We just tried to make it more consumer version versus broadcast version. With the 9-inch, if you drop that on the floor of the truck, the microphone isn't going to move out of the focus point. With the Sound Shark, if you drop it, the microphone's going to pop out. You're going to have to check your focus point. Okay, applications. I'll go through these real quick, and then we
got a lot of questions. We're at 24 questions.
Okay. Football obviously is what everybody is aware of. Baseball, they're a lot of times used where you don't see them. They're hidden into the backstop at a lot of stadiums. We've been doing quite a bit of that. There's one or two audio engineers that are using them for NCAA and NBA. Have been used for soccer. I wish we could get the crowd noise at soccer games low enough to where we could use the big ones, but the crowd noise at soccer games is just outrageous. Here's a customer sent me pictures of them used horse racing. We know they've been used for boat racing. They didn't buy them, but Formula E did a test. It's, Formula E, they're moving fast, but you don't have the sound of the engine. So they were trying to increase the sound of the car to make it more exciting for viewers. And the audio guy came back and said, increase the range by about 250 meters. by using the.
But then they realize that it just sounds like a hobby shop. Just like.
Maybe that's why they didn't buy them. But
yeah,
the
exactly.
audio
It's like
engineer
everyone's
liked
just gonna remind everybody of childhood days at hobby shops. Anyway, go ahead.
We do have quite a few high schools that use them. It's a relatively inexpensive, and again, you're more focused on what's in front of you than behind. We're doing a lot in the military and security, search and rescue, Santa Clara. I don't know how many of you guys are close to Santa Clara County, but their search and rescue team did a test, and at 3/4 of a mile, they were able to recognize what the person was yelling out 86% of the time. A lot of nature. We sell a lot of the little ones for bird watchers. Again, it's a relatively inexpensive way to focus in on the bird of interest. We've sold them to, like National Geographic's videographers and stuff like that. They've gone to Antarctica, the North Pole, and all sorts of places. For a while, we had a company that was using them to detect drones approaching secure sites. Every once in a while, we'll get an application where an industrial situation is trying to find an air leak, and you've got this entire plant and they're trying to find an air leak, and they'll use a parabolic microphone to focus in on it. It works great if you have an air leak in your air mattress. I proved that out myself. It just hones right in on it. And there's one company using the parabolics to monitor the condition of brakes, because as the brakes wear, you put an ultrasonic sensor inside the parabolic and you can get all sorts of really interesting signatures off of those brakes. This is an old application in the Sears Tower in Chicago. They were taking video of people in that ledge, where it's all Lexan panels. Well, you got 1,000 people in the waiting area, and the reflected sound was driving every sort of shotgun mic they tried just absolutely crazy. So we switched to the little Sound Shark, and the audio was clear enough that they came up with software that would actually put the intro and outro automatically based on the start and stop of the audio. News people, this guy was in Poland, but they are used for news gathering, meetings, presentations. Wedding videographers have been good customers.
This question came up actually recently, and like last night, someone was asking about this, and they were like, "We need some microphone that can capture the bride and groom, without giving them labs." And I was like, "I know exactly who you should talk to. they're going to be on." I mean, the person who asked me may be in the audience here, but okay. I was like, I know exactly who has a solution for this. So you can use it for something for them for that, and like an angle to capture both of them.
Oh yes. Yeah, real easily. Because you're going out about 20 degrees, 15 to 20 degrees off center, depending on, the frequency. If you're 15 feet away, you've got a 8-foot, 10-foot diameter sweet spot. Yeah. So it works really well for those sorts of situations. I would like to see a lot more of the local news channels use this as a backup, because it drives me absolutely crazy when somebody's battery dies. They're doing the 6 o'clock news, and the battery dies, and you hear absolutely nothing. All they'd have to do is put a couple of these little guys above the desk and switch to it. It may not be as good, but it would work. Yeah. Philadelphia Eagles bought one. They were streaming their press conferences, and they couldn't hear, the people at home couldn't hear the reporter questions. They'd hear the answer, but not the question. So they have a guy in the front with a 16 getting the reporter questions.
I bet you could have just thinking through that with if you put that on a motorized head and you keyed in the person's seat number, you could pre-program it so it would just go whoop, right to that person without having someone have to do it. Someone could just hit a button, and I'm just going to go to the seat, and it would just hone right in on it.
Right. Last year when sports was real slow, we did a lot of work in the education and house of worship area. This particular application, UT Austin, instead of having 700 kids in one auditorium, I believe it was 100 kids in 7 different movie theaters with the professor projected on the screen. But now they had to get the questions from the students back to the professor, and they used a couple of 16s in the front of the theater to do that.
And
There's
that's a really important one. We have a lot of educators in our group to think and it's a really common question is how do we get the class into the hybrid event or however you're going to do that. And I, until I talked to you about this, I didn't even think that you could possibly use one of these, but and those two on either side are getting the whole theater, right?
Yes. Yes. Here's a guy at James, JMU. He decided to do his classes out in the quad, and he again used the little one so that the people at home could watch. A couple more classrooms at its different colleges. We have a lot of people that have told us at NAB and so forth, they use them for documentary, man on the street type interviews. You can just walk up. You don't have to worry about putting your wireless on the homeless guy or whether he's going to run off without giving you the microphone back. Again, for interviews, they're used quite a bit. You talked about the pan tilt. I'm working on it. That's not quite ready for prime time, but it works really well other than the homing sequence. I need to get PTZ to slow down the homing sequence. That little stepper motor just moves too fast. As unreasonable as it sounds, we have quite a few outdoor theaters where they're streaming or video recording the performance, not using it for PA, but just to record or stream. There's a Shakespeare Theater in Utah that's got like 9 of them. The one on the right is kind of interesting because you can put a wireless mic in it and put it, almost anywhere. Again, there was a guy in Canada that was doing a gag show and he couldn't get close. You couldn't put a boom mic out there. So he put a 16 inside a stroller, and the innocent looking mother is, pushing the stroller around, picking up everything he said. There's guy was using it to listen to the kids tell Santa what they wanted for Christmas. And up here in the top is one of these domes that you use at like museums. So the mom could sit there underneath the dome and hear everything the kid was whispering to Santa. Also use them in a number of cases for hearing impaired. With a little bit of electronics, you can bring them right into the hearing aids through the link, the wireless link. Have a couple of very pleased customers with that one. So that's my bit. I'll get off.
And we have so many questions. So you have less than a minute per question. So
okay.
Just letting you know, there is a lot of questions coming in. And actually, we have an answer for the first one from the audience. First question is from Douglas Carmichael, and he says, "Have you seen interest in your products from the nature wildlife videographer market?" And
definitely.
You definitely. And John Idelson wanted to add something there. John, are you? Did we get
you
in here?
I just wanted to show the one that we have. I don't know if you mentioned the windscreen, but we've used this with the state parks project. So this is what they call, I guess, not a dead cat, a dead pancake that is on top of the device. And we've had a great luck with it. When you need to get sound far and you can't get near it, and there's sometimes you don't want to get near the animals, this is a great way of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question is from Tommy Chance from St. Paul, Minnesota. What type of microphones are your dishes designed about or designed for, I imagine?
Okay, all of our dishes are designed around an omnidirectional. If you look, again, you can see how the omnidirectional at the center point, it fills up the full dish. If you put a cardioid in it, you're going to miss or reduce your amplification from the outside edge of the dish. If you ever see anybody suggesting that you put a shotgun inside of a parabolic microphone, they don't understand how they work.
Right. Very good. Next question is from Danny Law in Malaysia. He said, which type of mic would work best with the SoundShark? SoundShark, that's the smaller one. Still an omnidirectional?
Still an omnidirectional. You can put any omnidirectional inside there. The little clip works from about an 1/8 inch diameter to 5/16. That's, if you get real big, then our clip doesn't want to hold on to it tightly.
Do you have any specific brands that you like the best for putting into those?
The only thing that I ever say is if you're going to have it outside, we really like the Countryman B3 because it's an inexpensive microphone that's very water resistant. And we actually do have, Chris Countryman took one of our little dishes, mapped the audio characteristics, and there is a certain level of equalization right inside the XLR connector. So it gives you a flatter curve right out of the mic.
That's awesome. Next question is from Mike Beardmore in Reading, UK. How focused is the audio beam and can it be adjusted?
There's no adjusting. The polar charts, you'll have to come back and look at the polar charts. Again, we typically say 15 to 20 degrees off center is your sweet spot.
Right.
Beyond that, it's not like it just goes away, but it does fade off. The polar charts are really the best I can give you.
Next question is from James Brook in New York. Is anyone on the panel old enough to remember the toy called the Big Ear, which seemed to be a parabolic mic in design? We talked about that a little bit already. So that was the thing that kind of took over, right? Go ahead.
I think this was actually pre the Crystal Partners Big Ears.
Right.
There was a toy, just a real cheap, inexpensive plastic dish.
Oh, right.
And, anything with the right shape will work. It's a matter of how well it'll work.
Yeah. I remember getting one. I went to a boarding school and there was you could buy, and you could sit on back campus and just wander around, being the annoying little geek that I was, sit there and watch, what people were talking about. And we never really did anything with it other than play with it. Oh, this is really cool. And then went back to what we were doing. Douglas Carmichael says, have you seen your microphones used as audience mics for in-ear monitor mixing? So I guess. Yeah, go ahead.
Not that I've know of. There are quite a few football stadiums that have them mounted at the scoreboard to get the audience or the crowd noise. One of the scoreboard companies buys relatively frequently for that application.
Next question is from Stuart Fairweather in Melbourne, Australia. He said, do the parabolic mics come with a response curve graph with 3 dB down to indicate the limits of their frequency response curves? Well, you have, I guess that's what you're working on right now is the graphs that you have there of showing what frequencies are being supported at what distances.
Right. We're working on frequency charts. As far as the 3 BD down, you'd have to look at each parabolic with each individual microphone because it's going to vary from microphone to microphone. It's not complete yet, but I'm starting on a chart that if you move the microphone 1/4 of an inch off the focus point, what does that do to your frequency response? So
how do you calibrate for that? So as far as getting the mic in just the right place, if someone's putting their own mic in, I guess is the fixture really designed to put it right in the right place, or is there some kind of testing they have to do to make sure they're in the sweet spot?
The challenge really is where's the center of the pickup pattern for the microphone. We know that the focus point is 4 inches from the back of the front face of the big one, and it changes for each size. We make that available. It's, finding the focus point is not a problem. But if you have, for example, a Neumann 183 is the center of their pickup pattern, right at the front face, is it a 1/16 of an inch? Is it an 1/8 of an inch in? So you have to do a little bit of experimenting with that. As far as testing, probably the scariest thing I've seen is the Fox guy took one, pointed it at the sun. Even though it's clear plastic, there was enough reflectivity that the microphone started smoking in like 2 seconds.
So the sound
if you need a cigarette lighter,
So he pointed up at the sun and he heard this, and he's like, I can hear the sun, and it just turned out that the mic was on fire.
It was the foam rubber on, foam cover on the mic.
Sky Gleason from Seattle, Washington said, Guy asked yesterday if this type of mic system would work for capturing audio for a 30 to 100 person conference room full of people. And it sounds like that would probably be the case.
It depends on what he wants to capture. If he's trying to pick one voice out of, 100 people speaking at the same time, it won't. If you are, that picture that I had where there were 9-inch microphones hung from the grid, in that particular application, they were trying to have a forum of 27 people without having the host walk around with a stick mic. And we were able to get 27 people with 4 of the 9-inch mics.
John Preto from Las Vegas says, what is the approximate frequency response of the Klover MIK 26.
He answered it already.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, great. Next question is from Stuart Fairweather. How difficult is it to get good off-axis rejection? Is there a best practice mic type to use?
The design itself does most of the off-axis rejection.
Right.
Again, the biggest suggestion that we make is to be sure to think about what it's pointing at so that you don't have parallel walls.
Right.
Anytime you can come, that's why the microphone is up top looking down or off to the side looking in and not parallel to anything. That will make a world of difference.
Next question is from Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas. It said, is specialist training available or of a benefit for the use of the parabolic microphones?
We've really not had any need for that other than when CBS started switching from the old big ears to our mics, they were used to being able to just point it in the, you could be in the general direction and still get some sort of amplification. Because it's true parabolic and much more focused, they had to be actually paying attention and following the action with their microphone. Right. And the other thing that we taught them is to reduce the amount of crowd noise you get, pointed at their feet, not at their head. Because if you think about that cone going over, the lower you go, the less of that stadium you're going to get behind the player. That's
great. It's not that wouldn't be obvious when you first started doing it, is to do that. Right. Next question is from Stuart Fairweather in Melbourne, Australia. There's plenty of vigorous discussion about how parabolic reflectors have issues with frequencies of a longer wavelength than the width of the dish, 500 hertz at 66 centimeters. How does such a limit affect the ability to capture the spectrum of human voices?
Well, as I said, I have a little different point of view than that on how the frequency affects it, because the wavelength is horizontal. What most people think about is amplitude, that the amplitude gets too large for the diameter, but it's not really the case. And hopefully this will work. You have to think about sound waves are longitudinal, not transverse. So you can't think of it like you think of a satellite dish. So the wavelength is the distance from one point to the next that has the same pressure. So this is transverse. This is what a lot of people think about with the wave being too large for the diameter of the dish, but that's not the way the sound waves are working. So again, the general theory about how the frequencies are affected, I don't necessarily agree with it. My personal opinion is the low frequency response has more to do with the reflectivity of the dish than the diameter. And we can talk after hours. I don't want to spend too much time being geeky right now, but just the 9-inch itself, according to all the rules and formulas and everything that I've been able to find in the last 9 years, says it shouldn't work at anything below, like 2 kilohertz. But you're hearing my voice. So I think there's a misunderstanding of how the frequencies and the wave patterns are working with respect to the parabolic microphone. I hope that answers this question.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question is from Noah Sargent from Fullerton, California. Could polar patterns be better visualized if color coding was used to show their response based off of frequencies?
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out the best way to make those different lines more legible and still make it something that you can print out in black and white. So yeah, I'm working on that. I know that it should be easier to tell the difference.
Next question is from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It said, can you describe the process of aligning the position of the mic inside the dish? Is there a single optimal adjustment, or are there reasons to use different settings?
Okay, as we mentioned about, there's one focus point. It's 4 inches behind the front face of the 26. 1 1.5 on the 16 and 1 1/8 on the 9. So we know where the focus point of the dish is. It's a matter of where the center of the microphone pickup pattern is.
And when you're moving that, do you have like a screw function that you kind of screw in or pull out to get the mic to where it needs to be? How do you mount it to make fine adjustment?
I just use a straight edge. I actually put a little label on the dish, so you can take the microphone bar out, put it next to that label, adjust your microphone, and lock it down with the thumb screw. As John's showing on the 9, we have a little set of screws that you use to move it in and out. It's again, I'm working on the charts to back it up, but it's not as finicky as you might think.
Right.
If you're within 1/8 of an inch, you're usually more than good enough.
Next question is from Josh Kaufman. Is it possible to have an adjustable parabolic reflector that can vary in range, like a zoom lens?
Basically, the diameter sets the amplification. So the only zooming is to go to a different diameter. The depth does make some difference. The deeper the dish, if you think about the parabolic curve, the deeper the dish does provide more directionality, but it really doesn't, it's not something that's easily adjustable. I actually was working with a professor from Rutgers that was working on a infinitely adjustable parabolic shape, but because it was flexible, the reflectivity was not ideal. So I don't think that ever went too far.
Next question is from Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas. Are the parabolic microphone techniques depicted in the 1974 Francis Ford Coppola film, The Conversation, realistic?
I've never seen a TV show or a movie that showed parabolic microphones realistically.
There we go. Or very many things realistically. Right. Yeah.
You can't have a 9-inch dish and listen to something, a quarter mile away and hear every word they're saying in a city street. Yeah. It just doesn't work that way.
That's a nice thought, though. Next question is from Rupert McCrae. Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas. Are parabolic microphone design principles, in fact, very similar to parabolic antennas in RF designs?
They are. Again, the difference is sound waves are longitudinal and not transverse. So the diameter is much more of an issue with a satellite dish. The other thing is I was actually hoping to use the satellite dish, one of these segmented satellite dishes with carbon fiber. They've got all the molds and everything, but their receiver is not a single point, it's a circle. So you basically take the parabolic and at the bottom you split it and slide it out. So there's a flat spot at the center of the parabolic. So it's not a direct correlation, but in theory, yes.
Next question is from John Endelson in Monterey. Have your microphones been used for nature recording? I think we covered that. I think John covered it. But remember,
yes, a lot.
Yeah. Next question is from Stuart Fairweather. Which mic is Paul using in his parabolic reflector? How difficult is it to get the mic in the sweet spot? So a lot of us are very fixated on the sweet spot there. What mic are you using right now with your parabolic?
The one that I have right now that you're listening to is the one that the Countryman builds for us that has basically a bass boost built in. Mm-hmm. It's still not perfect, but it's better than if I would use a standard B3. And again, in after hours, we can do some demonstrations if people are interested.
Absolutely. John? Or are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Yeah, Paul, the mic we use is the one that you sold that had the little adjustment in it. I will admit that a standard lapel is not as good as the one you had that you sold us, because we played with a standard microphone, and I forget the model number, the one that you sent with when we bought it.
Yeah, the equalized mic definitely makes it easier. We developed that so for like news people or whatever, where they can't equalize, they can use it right out of the mic.
The next question is from Rupert McCrae. He said, what materials are used for collector construction?
Right now, the vast majority are polycarbonate, which if you think about a year or so ago, trying to get polycarbonate was like trying to prospect for gold. They were talking, 34, 45 week lead times because polycarbonate was used for, sneeze shields and dividers in the restaurant and everything else. So it was a tough time. And then when we did get polycarbonate, it was very low quality because of the demand and so forth. So we're finally getting past those issues, but we use 1/8 inch, 3/16 and 1/4 inch polycarbonate. I'm working on potentially doing carbon fiber.
Next question is from Noah Sargent. He said, as the dish gets smaller, what happens to the EQ response? More or of the low in roll-offs?
Again, I'm working on the frequency charts, but it does get more of a frequency change with the smaller ones. But again, my personal opinion is because of reflectivity and not necessarily the wavelength.
Next question is from Rupert McRae. What is the best way to align a fixed parabolic microphone to a fixed known position? Would you use something like a tone generator at the subject end and a spectrum analyzer at the local end, or do you just do it audibly?
That's definitely a good way. Originally, we actually had a little laser mic like you'd use on a laser pointer like you'd use on a rifle, so that you could find your center spot. But if you're 100 yards away, you don't see the laser spot and it becomes kind of useless. But the guys on the football field, you'll see them wearing the earphones. They're aiming more with their ears than they are with their eyes.
Right.
You definitely get the feedback. So a tone generator would be a good idea, or just somebody standing there talking, and moving the microphone to hone in on it. But if you just sight down the microphone, it's awfully close.
Next question is from Jacob Hare from Charlotte, North Carolina. What is the reason for the frequency stopping at 16 kilohertz as opposed to 20?
Just my choice, to be honest. Most people aren't really interested in capturing, 20 kilohertz that often. So I couldn't hear it anyway.
Is it Sanken, I think, makes 100 kilohertz microphone that I'm dying to get. I don't, because I guess a lot of sound effects folks will go and grab stuff that you can't hear, and then they bring it down. They go and reach up and grab it, and then shift it down into it, so they get all this other stuff. It'd be really interesting to match one of those with your parabolic. Next question. Oh, go ahead. What were you saying?
Real quickly, I know you guys. There's a lot of fans of the Mix Pre 3 out there. We've actually just fallen in love with the Mix Pre and the noise assist for the police and military and security market, because the bad guy is always standing next to a railroad track or an interstate, or in the middle of a crowd. And the noise assist, if you crank it all the way up to 20 dB, does a very nice job of getting rid of that ambient noise and letting you hear the person of interest. So
if you're a bad guy listening to our show, nowhere's safe now. Nowhere safe. We're just letting you know. You're not going to get. We're just warning you. Josh Kaufman from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania says, "Does the diameter of the dish affect the frequency response?" We talked about this. This is we're very focused. We're very focused on that, but I think we covered that one pretty well.
More to come.
Tommy Chance from St. Paul, Minnesota, said, "Is feedback an issue in a handheld unit in an indoor PA system? Thinking about house of worship."
Yeah, going through a PA is always a challenge. I know some people have used, the anti-feedback devices with mixed results. Again, the placement is super, super critical. If you have a parallel wall, so the sound energy coming out of the speaker is bouncing off a wall and then back into the parabolic, it's just instantaneous. So it's very difficult. I'm not going to say it's not doable. I've done it at very low amplification settings at our church, but it's really, really tough. And speaker placement, obviously, relative to the mic is critical as well.
Next question is coming from Douglas Carmichael. He said, "I'm impressed with your 4-monitor Lumix ATEM setup. What Lumix model and lens are you using?"
I have a GH3 up there. I'm a photography hack. I love photography, but I'm not necessarily good at it. This business lets me buy some cameras for testing and demonstration purposes. So I have a GH3 up there, an A6500 over there. I've got an old Canon A1, I think it is.
Right.
And then PTZ Optics donated a PTZ Optics camera for my project on mounting the dish to the camera.
Right. That's great. Douglas Carmichael said, your company is on the GSA schedule. What government customers can you talk about?
We just recently got on the GSA, but we have sold to the FBI, State Department. Army uses them for training videos. I don't know if they actually use them for surveillance. Mm-hmm. We've sold to like the Defense Department or security agency in Indonesia. We're working on one in a Middle East country. So they do get used in a lot of different government applications. We were working on a project with Border Patrol, but for whatever reason, new administration or whatever, that went away. It would be, good for, again, monitoring interview situations.
Right. Next question is from Douglas Carmichael. Would there be any value to use tracking, like a tracking system like BlackTrax, to move the parabolic mic to track a specific target?
Definitely.
And are you familiar with BlackTrax?
I'm familiar with similar products. I'm not real familiar with that one.
Their big thing is that you can put a tracker on somebody and then it
Right.
just sits there and follows them around. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Next question is, go ahead.
There's actually a company, slight variation on the question. There's a company in Canada called Remote Camera Technologies. And with all the remote production that's in place now, or people are moving toward it, you basically have, let's say, a tripod with a handle and a monitor on it in New York City, and it can be running a camera in LA. And whatever the camera operator in New York City does, the camera in LA follows it, and he sees it move. And
Right.
we're working with them to put our parabolic on top of that camera that's remotely operated. So yeah, the sky's the limit in that general area.
Absolutely. Last question for the day from Josh Kaufman. It said, would it be practical to have an array of different diameter microphones in a system to dynamically switch between them depending on the desired pickup range?
To be honest, in most cases, you would just want to start out on the high side and turn down the amplification when you don't need it.
Right.
That's the easy answer. I can't find it quick enough on my website, but I've actually developed, when we were working with the people doing the drone detection, we had an array of parabolic dishes, so you could cover like an entire hemisphere of the sky with an array of like 6 different parabolics, and the overlap of the pickup pattern would fill in the holes. So
that for aliens?
No, that's great. Paul, thank you so much for your time. It was really, really interesting.
It's been fun. It's been fun.
I feel like my head got larger. I understood. I learned a lot watching this. So thank you so much. And I know you've already jumped into Discord and you're in you. Hopefully we'll pull you into after hours now and again. And it's just great to have you as part of the community now. So thanks so much.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad John introduced me. Thanks for that, John. And I'll jump over to after hours if people still have questions or want to get even geekier.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds great. And thank you to the producers for a great set of questions once again. And thank you for our panelists for holding down the fort for the first hour. Great set of answers. And remember, tomorrow we'll have a Q&A with AWS. So just general open discussion talking about how we're using it and what we're working on. All right. Now we're going to jump into after hours. See you there.